The Day the Deathworlders Rose, Part 1. The Cargo Freighter. Endurance drifted through the black void between stars, its hull scarred from years of service. Captain Minho Park sat in the command chair, watching the navigation display with tired eyes. 3 more days until they reached the Thalari colonies with their medical supplies. 3 more days of the same boring route he had flown 100 times before. Yuna Kim, his navigator, was running diagnostics on the jump drive. Hajin Lee, the engineer, was somewhere below decks fixing another coolant leak. It was just another standard run for a human crew on the outer edges of Council space. Nothing special, nothing dangerous. The distress beacon changed everything. It came through on the emergency frequency, weak and broken. Yuna picked it up first, her fingers dancing across the console. "Captain, we have a distress call. It's from Research Station Gamma 7. Minho straightened in his chair. Gamma 7 was a Council science outpost, home to maybe 200 researchers from various species. "Put it through." The voice that came over the speakers was panicked, broken by static. "Anyone, please. They came from nowhere. Everyone is dead. They're still here. Oh God, they're—" The transmission cut off with a scream. Minho looked at Yuna. She looked back at him. They both knew what they had to do. Council law required all ships to respond to distress calls. But more than that, there were people dying out there. "Change course," Minho said quietly. "Get us there as fast as you can." The Endurance dropped out of faster-than-light travel 3 hours later. What they found made Minho's blood run cold. The research station was torn apart, its modules cracked open like eggs, bodies floated in the vacuum, frozen and twisted. Emergency lights flickered in the wreckage, creating shadows that looked almost alive. "Life signs?" Minho asked, though he already knew the answer. Yuna checked her instruments. "I'm reading—" "Wait, yes. 43 survivors in the emergency shelter. The shelter is holding, but barely." They brought the survivors aboard. Most were in shock, wrapped in emergency blankets and staring at nothing. A Nostari scientist named Pelith was the first one who could talk. He was small and covered in soft blue fur, his large eyes filled with horror. "They came 3 days ago," Pelith said, his voice shaking. "We detected them too late. They moved so fast. Ships that looked like they were grown instead of built. They attacked without warning, without trying to communicate. They just killed everyone they could reach. Some they took. We could hear screaming for hours." "Who were they?" Minho asked gently. "We don't know. We sent a warning to the Council before our communications were destroyed. They were like insects, but huge. They worked together perfectly, like a swarm. They tore through our defenses like they weren't even there." Pelith looked up at Minho with those huge eyes. "Your species, you come from a dangerous world, yes? You have seen war?" Minho nodded slowly. "Yes, too much of it." "Then you understand. These creatures, they are made for war, for killing, for consuming." Pelith's voice dropped to a whisper. "And they're heading toward the inner colonies." The Galactic Council convened within a day. Minho had never seen the Grand Chamber before. It was a massive space station, big enough to house representatives from all 73 member species. The chamber itself was beautiful, designed to make everyone feel welcome. Soft lights, comfortable atmospheres, translation devices that made everyone understand each other perfectly. But today, the chamber felt different. Today, it felt afraid. Ambassador Jiwon Choi led the human delegation. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had been representing humanity for 20 years, fighting for respect in a galaxy that saw Earth as a backwater death world that got lucky. The holograms showed what the Council had learned. The enemy was called the Vryn Swarm. They came from beyond the galactic rim, from dark space where no one had explored. They had already destroyed 3 colony worlds, consuming everything. Billions dead. Entire civilizations erased. The council representatives were panicking. The Letherians, beings made of living crystal, spoke of immediate evacuation of the outer colonies. The Kolvar, a species that had mastered technology beyond human understanding, talked about building defensive stations that would take decades to complete. Chancellor Veleth, a tall, graceful being from a world with half Earth's gravity, called for order. We need solutions, not panic. We need to stop this threat before it reaches our core worlds. Stop them how? Demanded a Letherian representative. We have no military. We have police forces, security personnel, but not armies. The last war in Council space ended 5,000 years ago. Perhaps, Veleth said slowly, we need to ask someone who remembers what war means. All eyes turned to the human delegation. Jiwon stood up slowly. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of species that had looked down on humanity for 200 years. Species that thought humans were barely civilized. Species that had laughed when Earth applied for council membership, questioning how a species that still had wars could possibly join their peaceful alliance. You want us to fight for you, Jiwon said. It wasn't a question. We need soldiers, Veleth said. Your species has military traditions. You have wars in your history, recent history. You come from a world classified as Class 12 Deathworld. You have experience with violence. Jiwon smiled, but there was no humor in it. Experience. Yes, we have experience with violence, with war, with death. Do you know what we call our history? Our museums are full of weapons. Our stories are full of battles. We have killed each other over resources, over territory, over ideas. We've built weapons that could destroy our entire planet. And you want to unleash that? The chamber was silent. But, Jiwon continued, we also know what it means to stand against extinction. We know what it means to fight for survival. And we know what it means to protect those who cannot protect themselves. She paused. We will help you. We will send our soldiers, our ships, our Deathworld experience. But when this is over, when we have bled and died for your worlds, the galaxy will remember. You will remember what humanity sacrificed. Veleth nodded slowly. What do you need? Full military authorization, complete access to your technology, territory rights for colonies, and voting privileges in the Council security decisions. Jiwon's voice was steel. And one more thing. When this is over, Earth will never be called a death world with contempt again. We are Deathworlders. We survive what would kill you. We fight what would make you run. Remember that. The vote was unanimous. Minho watched the proceedings from the observation deck. Yuna stood beside him, Hajun on his other side. They had volunteered immediately, like thousands of other humans across Council space. We're really doing this, Yuna said quietly, going to war for species that barely respect us. We're doing this because it's right, Minho replied. Because they need us, and because if we don't, billions die. Hajun checked his datapad. First wave mobilization starts in 2 weeks. 500,000 volunteers already. They're calling it the Terran Defense Coalition. Minho looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Vryn were coming. Somewhere out there, the galaxy's nightmares were heading toward everything civilization held dear. But they would meet something they hadn't encountered before. They would meet humans. They would meet Deathworlders. And the galaxy would learn what that truly meant. The day the Deathworlders rose. Part 2. The training facility on Moonbase Arcturus was built for Council security forces. It was designed with comfort in mind, with gravity set to standard galactic norm of 0.7 Earth standard. The barracks were climate-controlled. The food processors offered nutrition optimized for 70 different species, and the training courses were meant to be challenging but not dangerous. Then the humans arrived. General Taehyun Kwan stepped off the transport ship and looked at the facility with the eyes of someone who had spent 40 years in military service. He saw soft ground on the running tracks. He saw training equipment designed for species that had never known real predators. He saw a facility built for peacekeepers, not soldiers. "This won't work," he said to his second-in-command, Colonel Nari O. Nari nodded. "Want me to request modifications?" "Request?" Taehyun smiled grimly. "No, we're going to rebuild this whole place. The council wants soldiers. We'll give them soldiers. But we do it our way." Within a week, the facility was transformed. The gravity was increased to 1 full Earth standard. The climate controls were turned off in the training areas. The soft-running tracks were torn up and replaced with rough terrain. The humans brought equipment from Earth. Weights, obstacle courses, combat simulators that didn't pull their punches. The alien observers were horrified. Drill Sergeant Soman Bay stood in front of her first group of recruits, 200 humans, most of them young, all of them volunteers. They stood at attention in the cold morning air, breath misting in front of their faces. "Welcome to hell," Soman said pleasantly. "For the next 12 weeks, you belong to me. You will run until your legs give out. You will fight until your knuckles bleed. You will learn to function on 4 hours of sleep and field rations. You will become what the galaxy needs, Deathworlders who remember what we are." A Nostari observer named Peleth, the same scientist rescued by the Endurance, watched from a safe distance. He had volunteered to work as a technical liaison, helping humans understand council technology. But right now, he was watching something he couldn't understand. 40 kilometers, he said to himself, checking the training schedule. They're running 40 kilometers in full combat gear? That will kill them. But it didn't kill them. They ran. Some vomited, some collapsed and had to be helped to the medical bay. But most of them finished. And the next day, they did it again. Private Junho Han was one of the youngest recruits at 19 years old. He had grown up hearing stories about Earth's wars, about humanity's bloody history. He had volunteered because he wanted to prove himself, to show that even someone from a peaceful city on Earth could be a soldier. The training was harder than anything he had imagined. On the 3rd day during combat drills, he broke his wrist in a fall. The medic wrapped it, gave him painkillers, and sent him back to training. On Earth, that was standard. An injury that wasn't life-threatening didn't stop training. Peleth saw this happen and was shocked. "He's injured. Why is he still training?" Soman overheard. "Broken wrist won't kill him. Pain is temporary. Quitting is forever." But his body is damaged." "His body will heal. We're built for it." Salman watched Junho struggling through one-handed push-ups, his face twisted in pain but determined. "Our ancestors survived broken bones while being chased by predators. We evolved to keep going even when hurt. That's what makes us Deathworlders." Peleth began spending time with the human recruits, trying to understand them. Junho, despite his injury, was friendly and curious. They would talk during meal breaks, sharing stories about their different worlds. "Your world," Junho said one day. "Tell me about it. Is it really peaceful? No predators? No natural disasters?" Peleth nodded. "Nostara is a garden world, stable climate, gentle seasons, plants that feed us without cultivation. The most dangerous animal is about this big." He held his hands maybe 30 centimeters apart. "And they only eat insects." Junho laughed. "On Earth, we have animals that can kill and eat humans. Sharks in the oceans, bears in the forests, snakes with venom that stops your heart. We have storms that destroy entire cities, earthquakes that crack the ground open, volcanoes that bury everything in lava." "How do you survive?" Peleth asked, genuinely confused. "We adapt, we build, We fight back. Junho flexed his wrapped wrist carefully. We don't give up just because something is dangerous. That's the human way. 6 weeks into training, the Vryn attacked. It wasn't supposed to happen. The training moon was far from the front lines, deep in safe council space. But the Vryn had moved faster than anyone predicted, using some kind of jump technology that bypassed normal detection. 5 Vryn ships appeared in orbit. They launched drop pods toward the surface, each one containing dozens of Vryn warriors. The alarm went off at 300 hours. Solman was awake instantly, years of training kicking in. All recruits. This is not a drill. Arm yourselves and report to defensive positions. The council personnel began evacuation procedures immediately. That was what they were trained for. Run, hide, call for help. But the humans didn't run. General Tae-hyun stood in the command center, watching the Vryn pods descend. He had maybe 3,000 partially trained soldiers, limited ammunition, and no heavy weapons. Against a numerically superior force of enemy warriors evolved for killing. The odds were bad. But Tae-hyun had fought bad odds before. All units, listen up, he broadcast. The Vryn are here. We are not running. We are not hiding. We hold this position until every council civilian is evacuated. After that, we make these bugs regret ever coming to our moon. Am I clear? The response came back from 3,000 voices. Sir. Yes, sir. The Vryn were like nothing the humans had trained for. They were big, roughly human-sized, but covered in black chitinous armor. They moved fast, scuttling on multiple limbs, using the moon's low gravity to leap impossible distances. Their weapons were biological, shooting spines and acid. Corporal Hyejin Song held the eastern perimeter with her squad of 15 recruits. They had been training together for 6 weeks. They knew each other's names, each other's fears, each other's families back home. The Vryn came at them like a wave. Fire! Hyejin screamed, and the night lit up with gunfire. The Vryn were tough. Bullets that would drop a human sometimes just slowed them down. But humans were tough too. When the Vryn broke through their firing line and it came down to close combat, the humans fought with knives, with rifle butts, with their bare hands if necessary. Junho found himself face to face with a Vryn warrior. His wrist was still healing, his weapon was empty, and the creature was hissing at him with mandibles that could tear him apart. Fear flooded through him, the kind of primal terror that his ancestors felt when facing predators in the dark. But his ancestors had survived. They fought back. They won. Junho grabbed a piece of broken pipe from the ground and swung it with all his strength. The Vryn's armor cracked. It screeched. Junho hit it again, and again, and again, until it stopped moving. Then he picked up his weapon, reloaded, and kept fighting. The battle lasted 4 hours. When the sun came up over the training moon, the Vryn were retreated back to their ships. They had learned something important. Humans would fight back. But the cost was terrible. 3,000 humans had held the line. 2,700 survived. The council evacuation ships had saved every single civilian. General Tae-hyun walked through the aftermath, checking on his soldiers. So many were injured. So many were dead. These were barely trained recruits, and they had fought like veterans. Peleth found Junho in the medical bay. The young human was getting his wrist recast and had burns from Vryn acid on his arms. But he was alive. You fought, Peleth said, still trying to process what he had witnessed. You all fought. You could have evacuated with us. You should have run. Junho looked at him with tired eyes. We're Deathworlders, Peleth. Running is what we do when we're planning to come back stronger. Standing and fighting is what we do when someone needs us. The memorial service was held 3 days later. 300 names carved into a stone monument. 300 humans who died protecting people they barely knew for a galaxy that had never respected them. Ambassador Jiwon attended via hologram. She looked at the faces of the survivors, at the grief and pride mixed together. These were her people, Earth's children, far from home, paying the price for the galaxy's peace. "Remember their names," she said. "Remember what they gave. And know that the galaxy is watching. They see what humanity is now. They see what Deathworlders really means." That night, across Council space, the footage of the battle was broadcast. The galaxy watched humans fighting impossible odds. They watched young soldiers charge at creatures that should have terrified them. They watched humans die protecting alien civilians. And slowly, reluctantly, the galaxy began to understand. Humans weren't just survivors of a dangerous world. They were protectors. They were warriors. They were exactly what the galaxy needed. General Tae-hyun stood before his remaining soldiers. "Training continues tomorrow. We have 8,000 more recruits arriving next week. We have a war to win. And we have 300 reasons to make sure we win it right." The soldiers stood straighter. Their grief transformed into determination. They had been tested. They had proven themselves. The Deathworlders had risen, and the galaxy would never be the same. The day the Deathworlders rose. Part 3. 18 months had passed since the first human soldiers deployed to the front lines. The war with the Vryn had spread across 12 star systems, consuming worlds faster than the Council could evacuate them. Billions had died. Entire civilizations had been erased from existence. The human fleet had become the backbone of Council defense. Every major battle, every desperate holding action, every last stand included human ships and human soldiers. They fought because someone had to. They died because that was the cost of protecting the galaxy. Commander Doyon Shin stood on the bridge of the destroyer Resolute, watching enemy contacts multiply on his display. The Vryn were hitting the Thalari system with everything they had, 300 enemy ships against the Fifth Fleet's 70 vessels. The math was simple and brutal. "Sir, we should fall back," his tactical officer said. "We can't win this fight." Doyon looked at the evacuation status. 2 million Thalari civilians were still on the surface, loading onto transport ships as fast as they could. If the fleet retreated now, those transports would be defenseless. "We hold the line," Doyon said. "Every minute we buy them is 1,000 more lives saved." His crew didn't argue. They had all volunteered for this. They all knew what it meant. The Resolute and her sister ships formed a defensive wall between the Vryn fleet and the evacuation zone. They fought with everything they had: missiles, railguns, laser batteries. When ammunition ran low, they rammed. When engines failed, they used their ships as shields for the transports. Doyon's ship took a direct hit that cracked her spine. Emergency bulkheads sealed, cutting the ship in half. Half the crew was dead in an instant. The other half kept fighting. "Evacuation transports are away," the communications officer reported, her voice steady despite the alarms screaming around them. "All civilians are safe." "Good," Doyon said. He looked at his remaining crew. 15 people left alive on a ship built for 200. "Anyone who wants to take an escape pod, go now. No shame in survival." No one moved. "Then let's make this count." Doyon programmed the ship's reactor for overload and aimed the dying Resolute at the largest Vryn ship. For Earth. For humanity. For everyone we couldn't save. The Resolute exploded in the heart of the enemy formation, taking 3 Vryn ships with her. On the jungle world of Verdania, a different kind of war was being fought. The Vryn had landed ground forces, thinking the toxic atmosphere and deadly wildlife would work in their favor. They had never fought humans before. Captain Seo-yeon Park led her ranger unit through the dense jungle, moving silent as ghosts. Her team was small, just 20 soldiers, but they were all volunteers from Earth's special forces. They knew how to fight in environments that would kill most species within hours. The atmosphere on Verdania had too much methane for most species to breathe safely. The plants secreted acids. The local predators hunted in packs with venom that caused paralysis. The humidity was 90%, and the temperature never dropped below 40 degrees Celsius. For humans who had trained in Earth's jungles, it was just another day of work. "Contact ahead," whispered Sergeant Minji Ryu, his thermal scope picking up Vrin heat signatures. 20 hostiles, moving toward the civilian shelter. Seo-yun considered the terrain. Thick vegetation, acidic water to the west, a pack of local predators circling to the east. The Vrin were moving in a tight formation, efficient and disciplined. "We split them," she decided. "Minjae, take half the team and make noise to the west. Drive them toward the predator pack. The rest of us will be waiting on the other side." It was a tactic as old as humanity itself, using the environment as a weapon. The Vrin were dangerous, but they didn't understand this world. They didn't know that the purple flowers released paralytic spores when disturbed. They didn't know that the streams would burn through their armor. They didn't know that the local predators were attracted to the pheromones the Vrin used for communication. Humans knew. Humans had spent their entire existence learning how to survive in hostile environments. This was just another hostile environment. The ambush was perfect. The Vrin, caught between human gunfire and local predators, never stood a chance. Seo-yun's team melted back into the jungle before reinforcements could arrive. Over 3 months, her ranger unit killed more than 2,000 Vrin on Verdania. The Vrin responded by sending more troops. Seo-yun's team adapted, using guerrilla tactics that had been perfected over centuries of human warfare. But the real test came when the Council transmitted a priority message. The Nastari homeworld was under direct assault. 2 billion civilians needed evacuation. The Council fleet couldn't reach them in time. The order came down from high command. All available forces should prepare for strategic withdrawal from the outer colonies. The Nostari homeworld was being abandoned. Admiral Sunho Kang received the order on his flagship, the battlecruiser Defiant. Around him were the remnants of the 7th, 3rd, and 9th fleets. 200,000 human personnel spread across 80 ships. They were already exhausted from constant fighting, already depleted from losses that would have broken most forces. He read the order twice, making sure he understood it correctly. They were to abandon 2 billion people to save the remaining fleet. Admiral Sunho looked at his senior officers. Colonel Nari O from the training base, now commanding a battalion of Marines. Captain Minho Park from the Endurance, now in charge of a squadron of destroyers. Commander Doyun's replacement, a young officer named Kyung Jae, who had survived the destruction of the Resolute. "Thoughts?" Sunho asked. "With respect, sir," Minho said carefully, "that order is bullshit." Nari nodded. "We didn't come this far to abandon innocents." Kyung Jae checked his tactical display. "The Nostari system is 6 hours away at maximum burn. We would arrive severely outnumbered. Survival probability is low." "How low?" Sunho asked. 12%, sir." Sunho smiled grimly. "I've beaten worse odds." He activated the fleet-wide communication channel. "All ships, all personnel, listen up. High Command has ordered us to withdraw, to abandon the Nostari homeworld and save ourselves. I'm giving you all a choice. Anyone who wants to follow that order can file for reassignment right now. No judgment, no consequences. But anyone who stays is coming with me to Nastara. We're going to save every person we can, or we're going to die trying." The response was immediate. Not a single person requested reassignment. "Then let's go be heroes," Sunho said. "Jump coordinates locked. All ships maximum burn. We have 2 billion lives to save." The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel above Nostara to find a nightmare. 50 Vrin capital ships surrounded the planet, launching drop pods toward population centers. Hundreds of smaller attack craft strafed evacuation sites. The orbital defense platforms were already destroyed. The human fleet was outnumbered 25 to 1. "All ships, "Weapons free," Sun Ho ordered. "We hold this planet until every civilian is away. I don't care how many of them there are. We make them pay for every inch." What followed became known as the Battle of Nostara, 6 days that would be remembered throughout galactic history. The human fleet fought with desperate courage. They used every tactic they knew, every dirty trick, every lesson learned from humanity's long history of warfare. When missiles ran out, they used railguns. When railguns failed, they rammed. When ships were too damaged to fight, they used them as shields for the evacuation transports. Lieutenant Bora Lim was flying her fighter when the engines took damage. She could eject, try to survive, but her targeting computer showed a Vryn capital ship moving toward a cluster of civilian transports. One ship could kill thousands. She didn't hesitate. Bora aimed her dying fighter at the capital ship's reactor core and pushed the throttle to maximum. "For the people we protect," she said, and her fighter became a missile. The Vryn capital ship exploded, taking 3 nearby attack craft with it. 2,000 civilians escaped because of her sacrifice. On the ground, Major Kyung Jae led Marine units in clearing Vryn forces from the evacuation zones. They fought deck by deck, corridor by corridor, using close-quarters combat techniques that the Vryn had never encountered. When ammunition ran low, they fought with combat knives. When knives broke, they used their fists. Kyung Jae himself killed a Vryn warrior with his bare hands, choking it until its chitinous armor cracked. The battle raged for 6 days, 6 days of continuous fighting with no rest, no relief, no hope of reinforcement. The human fleet was being destroyed piece by piece. Ships that had survived a dozen battles finally met their end. Crews that had fought together for months died together. But they held. On the 6th day, a secondary evacuation fleet arrived. Council ships from a dozen species all coming to help. The Nostari would be saved. Of the 200,000 humans who had fought at Nostara, 68,000 survived. More than half the fleet was destroyed. But 1.8 billion Nostari civilians lived because humans refused to abandon them. The Council, watching from their safe chambers, granted retroactive authorization for Admiral Sunho's disobedience. Ambassador Ji-won addressed them with barely contained fury. "You authorized it after they succeeded, after they proved they were right. After they saved 2 billion lives you were willing to abandon." She looked at each council member. "Remember this moment. Remember that humans died because you gave the wrong order, and remember that they disobeyed and saved your people anyway." The memorial for the fallen took up an entire space station. 68,000 names, 68,000 humans who paid the price for the galaxy's mistakes. But something had changed. Across council space, people spoke of the Battle of Nostara. They spoke of human courage, human sacrifice, human stubbornness in the face of impossible odds. The galaxy was learning. Deathworlders didn't just survive. They protected. They sacrificed. They refused to give up, even when giving up made sense. And the war was far from over. The Day the Deathworlders Rose, Part 4. 2 years into the war, the galaxy had changed. The council that once debated peace initiatives and trade agreements now discussed kill zones and acceptable casualties. The species that had known only peace for thousands of years were learning the vocabulary of war from humans, and humanity was teaching them. General Tai Hyun Kwan stood before a classroom of mixed species officers at the new Council War Academy. On Earth, it would have been called a simple briefing room. Here, among species that had no military traditions, it was revolutionary. "Strategy," Tae-hyun said, pointing to a holographic battlefield display, "is about making your enemy react to you instead of the other way around. You control the pace of battle. You choose where to fight. You make them come to you on your terms." A Litherian officer raised what passed for a hand. Its crystalline body refracted light in rainbow patterns. "But this requires deception, misleading the enemy. Is that not dishonorable? Tae-hyun looked at the being with patient eyes. Honor doesn't matter if you're dead. Neither does the population you failed to protect because you fought fair. War isn't about honor. It's about winning, so that people can go back to living in peace. The concepts were difficult for species that had evolved without predators, without competition, without the brutal calculus of survival. But they were learning. They had to learn. The Vryn gave them no choice. Colonel Nario supervised the deployment of weapon systems that the Council had previously banned under peace treaties. Nuclear warheads, kinetic bombardment satellites, chemical weapons designed to disrupt Vryn biological functions. A Kolvar ethics committee visited her weapons depot, horrified by what they saw. "These weapons are banned," their leader protested. "They are weapons of mass destruction. They violate every principle of civilized warfare." Nari looked at the Kolvar with tired eyes. She had been fighting this war for 2 years. She had lost friends, soldiers, people she had trained personally. She had no patience left for ethical debates from species that refused to get their hands dirty. "You asked for Deathworlders," she said quietly. "This is what we are. This is what it takes to survive on a world that wants you dead. This is what it takes to fight an enemy that wants to consume you." She gestured to the weapons. "You want to win this war? Then accept what winning requires. Or you can keep your ethics and watch the Vryn eat your children." The Kolvar left without approving the weapons. The next day, a Vryn attack killed 3,000 civilians on a Kolvar colony world. The day after that, the Kolvar authorized every weapon system Nari had requested. The war was changing everyone. Specialist Minjai Ryu worked in a division that most Council species didn't understand: psychological warfare. The Vryn operated on hive intelligence, coordinating through biological networks. They responded to threats with mathematical efficiency, allocating resources based on pure logic. Humans introduced chaos. Minjae's team broadcast human war cries across every frequency the Vryn used. They played recordings of Vryn deaths, of hive ships exploding, of queen mind signals being disrupted. They created false signals that made Vryn formations break apart in confusion. But the most effective weapon was simpler. They let the Vryn hear humans laughing. Before battles, Minjae's team would broadcast recordings of human soldiers telling jokes, sharing stories, laughing at death itself. For a hive species that operated on pure efficiency, the concept of beings who mocked their own mortality was incomprehensible. The Vryn began exhibiting something they had never shown before: hesitation. They started pulling back from fights they should have won. They started avoiding human formations even when they had numerical superiority. The fearless swarm was learning fear, but victory came at a terrible cost. Field Hospital Station 7 floated in orbit above a contested world. Dr. Yoonji Han worked 18-hour shifts treating casualties that arrived in a constant stream. Human soldiers with injuries that would kill any other species. A Marine came in with 3 broken ribs, a collapsed lung, and severe burns. Yoonji patched him up, gave him painkillers, and cleared him for duty within 12 hours. A Nostari medic working alongside her was shocked. "He should be in recovery for weeks," the Nostari said. "His body is severely damaged." "He'll heal," Yoonji said, already moving to the next patient. "Humans are tough. We evolved to take damage and keep functioning. It's how we survived. But the pain is just a signal. It tells us we're injured, but it doesn't stop us from functioning." Yoonji looked at the Nostari with eyes that had seen too much. "Do you know what the real difference is between humans and most species? You evolved in gardens. You learned that injury means stop, rest, recover. We evolved being chased by predators. We learned that injury means keep running or die. That programming is in our genes." The Nostari watched as the Marine, still in obvious pain, reported back to his unit. "They don't heal faster than us. They don't feel less pain. They simply refuse to stop. Yes, Yunji said simply. That's what makes us Deathworlders. In her private logs, she wrote, "We're saving the galaxy, one broken human at a time. I wonder if they'll remember the price we paid. I wonder if it will be worth it." Across the galaxy, humanity's reputation was transforming. The species that had been barely tolerated was now desperately needed. Human military doctrines spread through council forces like a virus. Alien officers started using human ranks, human unit structures, human tactical terminology. A Letherian admiral defended a colony using tactics learned from human instructors. A Kolvar ground force held a position using human defensive strategies. A Nostari pilot flew combat maneuvers taught by human aces. The cultural contamination was complete. The galaxy was becoming more human, more willing to fight, more willing to sacrifice for victory, and some council members were terrified of what they were becoming. Intelligence Officer Jiho Che worked in the deepest levels of council intelligence, analyzing Vrin communications and movement patterns. After 2 years of analysis, he found something that changed everything. The Vrin had a home base. A massive hive cluster in the Void Nebula, hidden in an area of space too dangerous for most ships to navigate. All Vrin forces originated from this cluster. All commands flowed from Queen Mines housed in the cluster's core. Jiho presented his findings to the Council War Committee. If we destroy the Queen Mines, the entire Vrin network collapses. All their forces, all their ships, everything falls apart without central coordination. The Council debated for weeks. Some wanted a containment strategy, building defensive lines that would take decades to establish. Others wanted to wait, to study the Vrin more, to find a peaceful solution. General Tae-hyun listened to the debates with growing frustration. Finally, he stood up. "While you debate, the Vrin are killing millions. Every day we wait is another world consumed." "You want to study them? You want to contain them?" He slammed his hand on the table. "I want to kill them. I want to take the fight to their home and end this war." "The Void Nebula is impossible to navigate," a Letherian counselor protested. "The radiation alone would disable most ships. The gravitational anomalies would tear fleets apart. It's suicide." "So was the Battle of Nostara," Tae-hyun replied. "So was the defense of Verdania. So was every fight we've won in this war. You keep calling us Deathworlders. You keep asking us to do the impossible, and we keep doing it." He looked around the chamber. "Give us the ships. Give us the authorization, and we will end this war." Ambassador Jiwon supported the plan. So did every human in the council. The vote was close, but it passed. Operation Eternal Dawn was approved. Humanity would take the war to the Vrin homeworld. They would assault the hive cluster, destroy the Queen Mines, and break the swarm forever. The survival probability was estimated at 12%. 97% of available human forces volunteered. Captain Minho Park, now promoted to admiral after 4 years of continuous combat, was given command of the assault fleet. His old friends from the Endurance, Yuna Kim and Ha-Jun Lee, were still with him. They had survived battles that killed thousands. They had seen things that would haunt them forever, but they had one more fight to face. "We've come a long way from hauling medical supplies," Yuna said as they reviewed the mission briefings. "Yeah," Minho agreed. "Back then, the worst thing we faced was equipment failures and boring routes. Now, we're planning an assault on the source of the galaxy's nightmares," Ha-Jun added. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "How did we get here?" "We volunteered," Minho said simply. "We saw people who needed help, and we decided that was more important than staying safe." They looked at the tactical displays showing the Void Nebula. Somewhere in that chaos of radiation and twisted space was the hive cluster. Somewhere in there were the Queen Mines that controlled billions of Vrin warriors. Somewhere in there was the key to ending the war. "Well," Yuna said, "if we're going to die, at least we'll die doing something that matters." That's the human way, Minho agreed. The fleet began assembling. Hundreds of ships, hundreds of thousands of soldiers. All of them volunteers, all of them knowing this might be a one-way trip. But they were Deathworlders. They had risen when the galaxy needed them, and they would finish what they started. The day the Deathworlders rose. Part 5. The assault fleet gathered at the edge of Council space, a massive armada of ships representing humanity's greatest military effort. 300 vessels ranging from massive battle cruisers to small destroyers. Aboard them, 200,000 human soldiers prepared for what might be their final mission. Admiral Minho Park stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Indomitable, watching the fleet assemble through the view screen. Each ship represented months of work, thousands of personnel, and countless sacrifices to get this far. Now they would all jump into the void nebula, into radiation and chaos, toward the heart of the enemy. "Fleet status?" he asked. Yuna Kim, now his chief navigator, checked her displays. "All ships reporting ready. Jump calculations are complete. But Minho, the void nebula's gravitational anomalies are worse than we thought. We'll lose ships just getting there." "I know." Minho had read the projections. 30% casualties just from the journey, before they even fired a shot. "But we don't have a choice. If we don't end this now, the war continues for decades. How many more Nostaras? How many more worlds consumed while we wait?" Ha-Jun Lee, now the fleet's chief engineer, joined them on the bridge. "Engines are optimized as much as possible. We've reinforced the ships for radiation exposure, but most of the alien vessels won't make it. Their technology wasn't designed for this environment." "Then they stay behind," Minho decided. "This mission is human only. We ask the galaxy for a chance to end this war. We don't ask them to die for our plan." The order went out. Non-human personnel were transferred to support vessels that would remain outside the nebula. Some protested, wanting to stay with the human crews they had served alongside. But the humans were firm. This was their fight to finish. General Tai Hyun Kwan addressed the fleet from his command ship. His image appeared on every screen, in every ready room, reaching every soldier preparing for the assault. "4 years ago, the galaxy asked us to be their soldiers. They asked Deathworlders to fight a war they couldn't fight themselves. We've lost hundreds of thousands. We've bled on worlds whose names we can barely pronounce. We've sacrificed for species that barely knew our names." He paused. "But we didn't do it for recognition. We did it because it was right, because people needed protection, because that's what humans do." He looked directly into the camera. "Today, we end this war. Today we take the fight to the enemy's heart. Many of us won't come back. But those who do will return to a galaxy at peace, a galaxy saved by human courage, by Deathworlder determination." His voice hardened. "So check your equipment, say your prayers if you have them, and prepare to show the Vryn what happens when they threaten everything we've sworn to protect." The transmission ended. Across the fleet, soldiers prepared in their own ways. Some wrote letters home, some checked and rechecked their weapons. Some simply sat in quiet meditation, making peace with the possibility of death. Private Junho Han, now a sergeant after 4 years of combat, gathered his squad. They were all veterans now, survivors of battles that had killed thousands. He knew every name, every face, every story. "Whatever happens in there," he said, "we stick together. We watch each other's backs. We bring each other home if we can." His squad nodded. They had lost friends, but the bonds between survivors were unbreakable. The fleet jumped into the void nebula. Immediately, alarms screamed across every ship. Radiation levels spiked. Gravitational anomalies pulled at hulls designed for normal space. The nebula was a nightmare of swirling gas, deadly particles, and warped physics that made navigation almost impossible. A destroyer's engines failed within the first hour. The ship drifted into a gravitational well and was crushed. 23 ships were lost in the first day just trying to navigate, but Yuna Kim was the best navigator in the fleet. She plotted courses through impossible terrain, finding safe paths through radiation storms that should have killed them all. Her human brain, evolved to find patterns in chaos, excelled in an environment that confused computer systems. "There," she said, pointing to her display. "That's our route. It's narrow, but the radiation is lower along that corridor. We can make it." "How sure are you?" Minho asked. 60%. "I've taken worse odds," Minho gave the order. "All ships follow navigation's course. Stay tight. If you drift, you die." The fleet moved through the nebula like a snake, following Yuna's path. More ships were lost, but fewer than projected. Human engineering, designed by pessimistic minds that planned for disasters, proved superior in the worst possible environment. 6 weeks into the journey, they finally detected it, the Hive Cluster. It was massive beyond comprehension, a structure of organic matter and metal spanning thousands of kilometers. Bioships grew from its surface like fruit. Vryn warriors moved through its corridors in numbers that defied counting. And deep in its core, the Queen Mines pulsed with malevolent intelligence. "Energy signatures indicate billions of Vryn," Hajun reported. "And I'm detecting some kind of psychic broadcast. The Queen Mines are coordinating everything from here." "How many ships defending it?" Minho asked. "Conservative estimate?" 5,000 Vryn vessels. The bridge fell silent. 5,000 against their surviving 200 ships. Worse odds than Nostara. Worse than anything they had faced. "Well," Minho said quietly, "no one said this would be easy." He activated fleet communications. "All ships. Battle stations. We've come too far to turn back now." 3 days from the Hive Cluster, the Vryn sprang their trap. The enemy had been waiting, watching, learning. They had let the human fleet penetrate deep into the nebula, burning fuel, exhausting resources. Now they struck with overwhelming force. 3,000 Vryn ships appeared from hidden positions, surrounding the human fleet. It was a perfect ambush, the kind of tactical sophistication the Vryn had never shown before. "They learned," Yuna said in horror. "They learned from us." "Then we'll have to teach them something new," Minho replied. "All ships, scatter formation. Use the nebula against them. Make them fight in our chaos." The human fleet broke apart, individual ships diving into radiation storms and gravitational anomalies that should have been suicide. But human pilots, trained on a world where gravity varied from mountains to valleys, where weather could kill in minutes, adapted instantly. The Vryn followed, their superior numbers meaning nothing in terrain that disabled their ships. One by one, human vessels picked off enemy craft in the chaos of the nebula. But the cost was terrible. The carrier Defiance took a direct hit that breached her reactor core. Commander Sujin Yoon had time to evacuate most of her crew, but not enough time to escape herself. She stood on the bridge as radiation flooded in, her fingers flying over controls. "Fleet, this is Defiance. I'm going to make this count." She aimed her dying ship at a cluster of Vryn capital ships and pushed the engines to maximum. The Defiance exploded like a small star, taking 17 enemy vessels with it. "Confirmed kill," Tactical reported. "Commander Yoon achieved 17 confirmations." "Mark it in the record," Minho said, his voice tight. "She'll be remembered." The battle raged for hours. Human ships fought with desperate courage, using every trick, every tactic, every ounce of skill. They were outnumbered 10-1, but they were Deathworlders. They had survived worse. When the ambush finally broke, the Vryn had lost more than 1,000 ships. But the human fleet was down to 140 vessels. "We can't survive another fight like that," Hajun said, surveying the damage reports. "We won't have to," Minho replied, looking at the Hive Cluster on his display. We're close enough now. We go straight in, hit the Queen mines, and hope the fleet can hold long enough for the ground teams to complete the mission. The remaining fleet formed up for the final approach. Every ship was damaged. Every crew was exhausted. But they had made it this far. General Tae-hyun assembled the Marine boarding parties, 20,000 soldiers in drop pods, ready to assault the hive cluster's interior. Their mission was simple: reach the Queen mine chambers and destroy them. The how was less clear. "We'll figure it out when we get there," Tae-hyun told his officers. "That's what humans do best: adapt, overcome, survive." Sergeant Jun-ho Han checked his combat gear one final time. His squad would be in the first wave, the ones who cleared the path for others to follow. The most dangerous position, the highest casualty rate. "Scared?" asked one of his soldiers, a young private who had joined after the Battle of Nostara. "Terrified," Junho admitted. "But fear is just a feeling. It doesn't control us unless we let it." The fleet approached the hive cluster. Vryn ships poured out to meet them, thousands of vessels defending their home. The human ships opened fire, creating a corridor of destruction that the drop pods would use. "Launch the drop pods," Minho ordered. 20,000 pods shot toward the hive cluster, carrying 20,000 humans into the heart of enemy territory. Some pods were destroyed by enemy fire. Others crashed into the cluster's surface with forces that would have killed most species. But humans were built to survive impacts, built to endure forces that crushed others. The pods cracked open, and soldiers poured out, fighting immediately. General Tae-hyun led from the front, his rifle in his hands, advancing into corridors of organic matter that pulsed with alien life. The Vryn came at them in waves, but the humans had fought them for 4 years. They knew their tactics, their weaknesses. And inside the hive cluster, cut off from the Queen mine's direct control, individual Vryn warriors were less coordinated, less effective. Sergeant Junho Han's squad fought through 3 kilometers of corridors, their ammunition running low, their armor damaged, their bodies pushed beyond normal human limits. But they kept moving forward. Finally, they reached a massive chamber. Inside, pulsing with bioluminescence, was one of the Queen mines. It was enormous, a creature of such intelligence and malevolence that its presence felt like pressure on their minds. It spoke directly into their thoughts, its voice like knives. "You are mistakes of evolution. Your world should have killed you. Your existence is suffering." Junho planted the antimatter charge at the base of the Queen mine's chamber. "Maybe," he said, "but we're your suffering now." The charge armed. Junho and his squad ran. Behind them, the Queen mine screamed,